In this video, I want to talk about how naturally thin people can gain muscle over 40. I'm a naturally thin person, and if you're like me, then you know how frustrating it can be, one, for you to try to gain muscle and you can't seem to do it, and then two, to be dismissed whenever people are like, oh, you're complaining because you're naturally thin? I wish I had your issue. That can be kind of frustrating sometimes if you know how frustrating it is when you actually want to gain weight and you can't seem to do it, okay? I'm gonna give you 5 lessons that I've learned from gaining muscle. I'm not nearly where I want to be as far as like gaining muscle, but I will say I have successfully gained muscle because I am 6'2" and about 185, 190 pounds. But I used to be 6'2", about 165 pounds, okay? That was like maybe after college. So I've come a long way, okay? So let's go ahead and get into this. First thing I wanna say is one thing I've learned about gaining muscle as a naturally thin person over 40 is that volume is key. And if you don't know what I mean by volume, so we're talking about strength training. This is given that you are strength training, calisthenics, bodyweight exercise, lifting weights in whatever form. Volume is when you are doing several sets, okay? Several sets. So typically when you exercise, you set it up in sets and reps. So you might do, for example, if you do 2 sets of 10 repetitions, maybe you're doing bench press or doing push-ups. Let's do push-ups. So let's say you do 2 sets of 10 push-ups. That means that you do 10 push-ups and then you wait and then you do 10 more, okay? Now, 2 sets is a relatively low volume for a muscle group, but typically you wanna aim for something more along the lines of, I would say for me, about 8 sets per muscle group, 10 sets per muscle group, maybe even more. That's been my experience now. This is in contrast to how I first learned to lift weights when I was in high school. The way that we lifted weights then, the focus was more on strength, okay? So we may even sometimes we might do 3, 4, 5 sets, but we're doing very low repetitions because we're trying to build strength. So volume is gonna be multiple sets and a decent amount of repetitions as well. So, I would say maybe about 8 or so sets per muscle group. And I'm just kind of like roughly estimating. And then maybe somewhere around 8 to 10 repetitions per set, kind of for a particular workout, for one workout, kind of around the volume that I use now, which is way more than what I used to do before. Because remember, the goal is to stimulate the muscle. And sometimes for those of us who are naturally thin, you could be like not doing enough to actually stimulate the muscle, okay? So that's one thing I say, volume is for sure key. The second thing, and it's something it was a hard pill for me to swallow. I'm a big calisthenics guy, but weights do work better. So I've gained more muscle in the past several months than I have in the past several years because I just recently returned to a gym, got a gym membership. I still do calisthenics, push-ups, chin-ups, all that stuff. I gained a decent amount of muscle with those, but I've seen a lot more muscle gain here in the past few months since I joined the gym. So it's been about a year now, it has been a year since my wife and I got a gym membership. And since then, I've reintroduced high volume bench press, high volume deadlifts, and different moves like that. And even, some arm exercises, curls, pull downs for the triceps. So I've seen the gains from those here in the past short period of time because weights work better. Now, the reason why they work better is because with calisthenics, you can gain muscle pretty well, but it's easy for them to get easy. And then you're doing, for example, with push-ups, you're doing sets of 30 reps, 40 reps. And while that does stimulate the muscle, it's something about stimulating the muscle like in like the maybe 8 to 15 rep range that tends to work better. It's like you fatigue the muscle faster, and that works better with gaining muscle. It just does. You know, I'm like I said, a calisthenics enthusiast, so I was really working hard to gain muscle with calisthenics, but it just hasn't worked as well. I'm not giving up calisthenics. They're still a very significant part of my workouts, but now they're kind of like a finishing move, so to speak, for my muscle groups. Okay, so like for example, again, if I'm doing chest, you know, I might do 4 sets of 10 for bench press, and then I might add 2 sets of as many as I can push-ups, 2 sets of dips as well. That way it's like finishing moves or whatever, like to really stimulate, tire out the muscle. That's what's worked for me. Third thing I want to talk about is the eating part. Now, eating is important. However, let me tell you about my experience when I tried to gain muscle from eating back in my 20s. So this is when I was around 165 pounds or somewhere around there. And I heard you need to eat a lot to gain muscle. And so I was eating a lot. I was trying to do it a healthy way. So I wasn't eating hamburgers and fries. I was doing a lot of, you know, carbs and decent amount of protein. I was making my own weight gainer shakes. So the weight gainer shakes were literally like frozen fruit. I put some greens in there, like spinach or something like that. I put oats in there. I put orange juice in there, and even like straight up oil, like olive oil or something like that. Like straight oil in there just to get the calories, you know. And I gained about 25 pounds over several months. But that was like one of the most unpleasant experiences I ever had. Not like I felt bad, but it was so painstaking. And I just didn't like paying that much attention to food. The moment I stopped, a lot of that weight went away. Some remained, so I did gain some muscle, but I gained a decent amount of fat as well. But it was so painstaking, I didn't really care for that. So I've opted really honestly to just kind of eat according to how I feel. You know, make sure I eat enough, eat heartily, and eat a decent amount of protein. And I think based on a lot of what I've learned now, that's really the key. Make sure you eat a decent amount of protein, you know, protein at every meal, maybe eggs in the morning, you know, and eat some healthy protein, you know, lunch, dinner, maybe snack on some nuts here and there. But as far as trying to gain muscle fast, if you really want to pay a lot of attention to food, then you can do like I did, eat several more meals a day, and you know, maybe make your own weight gainer shakes, different things like that. But even though I was eating healthier meals or trying to do it a healthy way, I'm just not really wanting to do that right now. And I'm okay, especially at the age of 40, I'm okay with like taking the long road, just making sure I'm eating enough, eating healthy, eating enough protein, and that type of deal. Because the thing is, when you try to do it fast, you're going to gain a lot of fat anyway. I think that's a lot of times, if you're like me and you're naturally thin and you're about 40, you're gonna gain it here. You know, it's just it's the facts of life. I don't gain any fat really in my arms or my legs, but it all goes right here, okay? So eating is important, but I'm more of a fan of not rushing it. Make sure you get enough protein. Make sure that the carbs that you eat are mostly healthy carbohydrates. Get healthy fats in. Don't necessarily stuff yourself with food all the time. Just make sure that when you eat, you eat. You know what I mean? Because again, when you get into a whole lot of snacking and different things like that, then you're gonna gain the wrong kind of weight, okay? All right, so the fourth thing I learned is that if you are like me and you're naturally thin and you are tall, like me, I'm 6'2", my limbs are long, it takes a while to see the muscle gains over longer limbs. Again, a kind of frustrating thing. I'm okay with it now at the age of 40. But it takes a while. So like literally over the past few months since I've gained a decent amount of muscle, I can feel, like if I touch my arm, for example, I can feel that my arms are larger. I can even see like enhanced muscle shape that shows I've gained muscle in my arms. But at the same time though, it still is kind of hard to see. My arms still don't necessarily stuff sleeves the way I want them to, you know, but I can feel it. But I've recognized that, okay, well, when that muscle is stretched over a long lever, so to speak, it's gonna take a while to see it, if that makes sense. So it is what it is. I can tell I'm gaining, but I also am comfortable with the fact that because I'm naturally thin, because I'm tall, it's gonna take a while to see it, which leads into my fifth point, which is it's gonna take a while anyway. Unless you start juicing, I mean, what I mean is taking steroids and stuff like that, or unless you start to, I don't know, whatever, it's gonna take a while if you try to do it the healthy way. But if it's any consolation, I've gained more muscle here at about 40 years old than I have at any other time because I got some of my training right. Like I started doing proper volume, and I've kept my eating pretty good. Just make sure that whenever I eat meals, that I eat meals. So age hasn't really had any effect on me, okay? I don't know what my testosterone levels are or anything like that, but as far as I'm concerned, as far as like what I've seen in these past few months, as far as muscle gain is concerned, I'm good. I'm just gonna take the long route because it hasn't been taking really long, but I'm not young and impatient, you know, where I'm like, oh man, what do? I think I know what works for my body now. So these are things that I advise for people who are naturally thin like me, who want to build muscle over 40, high volume. Make sure you don't eat like a bird, basically. You know, be patient with yourself especially if you're also thin and tall, and just generally just stick with the consistency part. As long as you do the right kind of stuff and you just kind of like, just do it. Don't really worry too much about weighing yourself, you know, maybe look in the mirror or whatever, then you'll gain, okay? So let me know if this was helpful, because I really want to know if it's helpful. This has really been the story of my life. So I identify with you if you are out there like me, naturally thin, trying to gain weight. Let me know what your biggest struggle is in regard to gaining muscle after 40. And yeah, I appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure you share it with somebody too.